Good morning, everyone. We are continuing the halachot of technology and halakha. And this is just going to be a completion of what we spoke beforehand. What is the prohibition of chashmal on Shabbat? And we have presented the opinion of the Chachamim on this, whether it's closing a circuit involves the milacha of boneh, and destroying involves the milacha of soter, and the opinions of those that it's only molid, it is creating something which is the Rabbanan. And it's interesting to note that there is a discussion, a very long discussion, in the Shirot Utshuvot Maim Chaim from Rabbi Yosef Messas, who discusses when electricity first came out in Morocco, what was the halachic discussion that went on there. And he says the following, that there was somebody who brought to them these light bulbs, which was the first thing that really came by, was light bulbs, and they had inside the light bulbs filaments, and nobody really knew what the halakha would be. Some were, maybe it's totally allowed, all you're doing is that there's always light there and you're just removing a window, so you can open and close lights on Shabbat. Some said no, maybe it's really considered for sure fire that you can't open and close. Some said, well, maybe you could ask a goy. So Rabbi Yosef says, I went to the chief rabbi then. I saw the first time that I saw these light bulbs was in Fez. I went to the chief rabbi then, Rabbi Shaul ibn Dinan, and I told him, what do you think about this type of light bulb? And he answered, even though I don't know how it works, but I know other Rabbanim that found out how it works, and they said it's categorically forbidden. And regarding Yom Tov, I also don't know, but Ra'ui le'achmir, it's proper to be stringent. Rabbi Yosef says he then went himself to a few places where you had the engineers and the workers that were in this field, and he asked them exactly how it works. And he says it is obvious that anybody who says that you are not creating a light don't know what they're talking about, he said. And on Shabbat, anybody who says such a thing is permitted is a blind person, and his opinions should be thrown in the wind. And not only that, you cannot say, well, I don't know, so therefore it might be permitted. It's better to be quiet when you say you don't know. And all the more so, thank you, not to make people stumble in public on halachot that are opposite from a Torah Kedusha. So he was categorically against it, and he said that it is asur mina Torah. And therefore, says Rabbi Yosef Messas, that opening a light on Shabbat is considered havara because you are creating fire inside this light bulb. And closing it, he goes through a very long discussion whether it's deoraita or derabanan, depending on kibui gachelet or not, depending on closing, on extinguishing coal. Now, Rabbi Yosef then went on to say a very phenomenal chidush that it could be on Yom Tov you would be allowed to close lights because hitiru sofan mishum tchilatan, because if you're not going to permit people to close them, then they're not going to want to open them. And there are certain isurim derabanan, and he understood that opening the light on creating light on Yom Tov is derabanan. So therefore, he said that if you're going to not permit on Yom, I'm not talking about Shabbat, I'm talking about Yom Tov. At the beginning, at the end, you're not going there. People are not going to go at the beginning. Kind of like that's why they permit Hatzalah people to go out on their call, because they're never going to want to go in the first place. Over here it says people are going to sit in the dark till Shabbat if they know they're not going to be able to open it in the first place. Both Rabbi Baruch Toledano and Rabbi Shalom Messas were vehemently opposed to this psak of Rabbi Yosef Messas. Rabbi Shalom Messas in Tivuat Shamesh has very long discussions about this back and forth with Rabbi Yosef in Siman Chav Zayin, Siman Chav Chet, and Siman Lamed Gimel. It comes out that many cases where you say Chachamim never allowed on Yom Tov closing lights or closing a candle even though they knew you weren't going to open it later. And Rabbi Baruch Toledano and Shirot Utshuvot Rabbi Baruch Orachaim Siman Chavtet right? He was a very good friend, a part of the Bedin with Rabbi Yosef Messas. He also says it can't be that you see that Chachamim were so careful that even a candle, you can't chop part of it off, even though it's not going to affect the kibui, because we're afraid you might come to extinguish. So you see how far of lengths they went. They're not going to allow just extinguishing just like that. And he says, I also saw that that even Rabbi Yosef Messas, he only allowed it by electricity, not by anything else. And even him, even then he writes that Chashmal is Asur Deoraita. So he doesn't understand how Rabbi Yosef could say such a chidush. But it's interesting the back and forth that the Chachamim had. Once again, that a light bulb is for sure Asur. Everybody agrees on Shabbat opening and on Yom Tov opening. Closing a light, Rabbi Yosef had a phenomenal chidush that Tevuot Shamish and Rabbi Baruch Toledano did not understand that it should be mutar at all, and they said closing lights on Yom Tov for sure should be asur. Interesting, there is a teshuvot about this from the great Rabbanim from Oran and that region. There is Rabbi David Cohen Skali and Chelik Bet of Kiryat Chana David Siman Mem discusses this, and he also wants to contemplate that maybe closing would be allowed on Yom Tov. And Lecha Shlomo as well, Rabbi Shlomo HaKohen from Dobdo. As I mentioned, Rabbi Shalom Messas and others, they were very against it. What do you see from this? What do you see from this? That this was all about opening lights where there was fire. They did not at all speak about closing circuits. That wasn't presented to them. So that is not up to a minhag. That is going to be up to discussions of the poskim, according to the Chazon Ish, according to Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, according to others, that they didn't deal with it at length. Now that's an important point, that the Sephardic poskim, like I mentioned last time, but the Rabbi Ben Sina Bashol, he did say that according to the Chazon Ish, something is forbidden, but in cases like a refrigerator when it's made to open and close, he was willing to consider that even according to Chazon Ish, it would be allowed. But he didn't say we didn't follow the Chazon Ish at all. So, and that was Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who was the main, we'll call him Bar Plukta, the one who argued against the Chazon Ish. He himself said, you can't be lenient against this psak. So all types of camera and zoom and whatever else that could be discussion of circuits, but not necessarily fire, is still going to be a safek deoraita because of the opinions that holds deoraita. So that's an important point to remember. And even though nowadays we don't have filament lights, we mostly have LED lights, there is going still to be a machloket of closing a circuit. Besides the fact that there's one of the poskim in Eretz Yisrael, his name is Rabbi Asher Weiss. He understands that LED lights are deoraita nowadays. So you have all opinions on the spectrum, but that's not going to be talui according to Sephardic psak. That's really going to be everybody's psak, and everybody's going to have their different opinions. And that's why whenever you deal with electricity, you have to take everything into account and try to find as many leniencies as you can if it's a situation that you have to be lenient or to stay away from it. Chazaku Baruch.